As of late, the interest in Sunderland's Jobe Bellingham has been massively ramping up. I mean, last summer he turned down moves from 2 Premier League sides, but that hasn't stopped other teams from being interested in bringing the 19-year-old English midfielder to their club in the upcoming windows. There has been numerous reports linking Jobe to the likes of Borussia Dortmund, West Ham, Tottenham, Crystal Palace, Brentford, and many more clubs across Europe's top 5 leagues. Therefore, I'm here to sit down and tell you exactly why so many different teams want Sunderland's midfield general playing for them next season, and why a move to sign him is a really good idea for the majority of clubs in Europe's top 5 leagues. I've been a really big fan of Jobe since he's arrived at Sunderland. I always thought he showed so much talent, but lacked the ability to remain consistent. But this season, under a new manager in Reggie Lebris, he's shown that once he's been given the right platform, he can dominate games consistently week after week. However, something I want to address, and something that I've noticed massively when anyone talks about Jobe Bellingham on social media, specifically on the platform X, is that he's deemed to be this overrated kid who's never really going to come up to something and is only in the position he is in because of his older brother being Jobe Bellingham. But that narrative couldn't be further from the truth. And on top of it being a false narrative, it's also incredibly disrespectful to Jobe, who has worked so hard to get to this position in his career, where he's now widely regarded by, obviously, clubs in football and many fans now as a really bright talent in football. I mean, he's gone as far as to actually have his first name on the back of his shirt to try and not disassociate with his family, but try and step out of his older brother's shadow, because them comparisons are always going to be there, and Jobe's worked so hard to build his own kind of presence, his own character, and he continues to show why people shouldn't just refer to him as Jude's little brother. Moving away from that media perception of Jobe and the way in which many people kind of knock him down purely because he's related to Jobe Bellingham, I want to look at the player that he is in himself. He did have a pretty tough start to life at Sunderland. I mean, he was playing in a team that were being controlled by multiple different managers throughout the course of the season, and a team that was very young and massively struggling to find form. However, this did allow, or maybe force, Jobe into showing just how versatile of a player he can be. He played as a centre forward, an attacking midfielder, a deep midfielder, and as a number 8 during different sections of this season. And although he wasn't consistent, he showed some real aspects of class, and it was clear to me personally that there was a lot of potential that just needed to be tapped into. But the lack of consistency in Jobe's game did lead to a lot of fans getting on his back. A lot of people were saying he's not that good. I mean, I remember putting a tweet out some point last season. It might have been when he scored against Southampton. He scored a worldie. And I said, you know, this lad has got a lot of talent. You can't tell me otherwise. And I got told otherwise by plenty of Sunderland fans. Actually, specifically Sunderland fans saying that I don't watch him every week, I don't know what I'm on about. Which, you know, it's a bit harsh, because I was tracking a lot of the Sunderland players then with a lot of young quality in that squad. So I did feel like I had a decent grasp on Jobe Bellingham. But a lot of the Sunderland fans weren't necessarily seeing what I was seeing. And to be honest with them, I'm not going to blame any Sunderland fan that said that, because in reality, they were in a really tough spot. They'd had some really poor managerial appointments. They'd had a pretty poor summer in terms of bringing in a goal scorer. And therefore, I did feel like the whole mood at the club was pretty down. So they were just kind of looking for someone to blame and just someone that they could get at. And Jobe, unfortunately, was victim of that a little bit last season. However, if you look at it now, plenty, and I mean plenty of Sunderland fans will tell you that Jobe Bellingham is their best player, if not, then at least in the top 5. But if we move on literally a few months and stepping into the 24/25 season, and in a team under Reggie Lebris, who's been an absolute revelation for Sunderland, and has guided them to being top of the league, Jobe Bellingham looks absolutely elite. Like, he is playing out of his skin every single week. It's not just the odd game where he would play really well, then disappear for a few weeks like it was last season. This season, he's dominating games almost by himself at times, every single time he steps onto the pitch. But to move on to the first portion of the analysis section of today's video, I want to look at his athletic profile, because I think it's a massive part of his game, and something that is definitely making him and allowing him to be so successful. I know I did try and emphasize separating Jobe and Jude from one another, but in all honesty, the way in which they move, their build and all-round presence is very, very similar. They're both massively athletic players who use their body weight, use their strength to their advantage really, really well. According to FotMob, Jobe is just over 6'3", and he uses that massive frame brilliantly, both when he defends and when he goes forward. In the most recent England under-21s game against the Netherlands, Jobe won 10 duels, more than any other player on the pitch. On top of that, he also won the most fouls of any player on the pitch as well, with 5 being won by Jobe. The Sunderland midfielder really does have a nice way of manipulating the ball using his large frame, which allows him to be effective at receiving the ball in the first phase when under pressure, and then also to be effective when he's driving through the second and first phase with his brilliant ball carrying that his athletic build and long legs facilitate. If we look at Jobe's heat map from one of their most recent games against Oxford, you can see that he pops up across the pitch. He's appearing a little bit here in the first phase, he's appearing in the middle, very, very middle of the pitch, but he's also popping up on the edge of Oxford's penalty box, and that's what I really like about Jobe. He dominates wide portions of that pitch. Now, when I'm looking at a player that wants to move on from the Championship to Europe's top 5 leagues, I look at 3 athletic and physical things about them. Are they combative in their duels? Are they easily pushed off the ball? And can they cover large portions of the pitch with, you know, having a high amount of stamina? Now, Jobe, he's combative in his duels, obviously winning 10 against the Netherlands. He is never easily pushed off the ball. Obviously that big frame, he uses it to his advantage, and he covers large portions of the pitch with desire, tenacity and aggressiveness both on and off the ball. So for me, I feel like he looks like, physically wise and athletically wise, he could make that step up, but obviously we're not going to see him playing against a Premier League team just as of yet. Obviously he played against Newcastle, but Derby Day, and they were always going to get battered in that game. So whether or not he can make the step up, I'm not 100% sure, but for me, looking on the outside, his physical and athletic profile suggests that he could well make that step up and do pretty well and cope with the physical aspects of maybe a Premier League game. But to move on from his athleticism and the physical profile of Jobe Bellingham, I want to look at what does he bring as a footballer. A pure footballer. Jobe's best position is without a doubt as a number 8, as it allows his defensive capabilities to be utilised, with him this season averaging 5.38 recoveries per 90, 6.33 successful duels per 90, 2.45 clearances per 90, and if we compare him to other midfielders in the EFL Championship this season, he sits in the top 9% for least challenges lost. But his position as a number 8 for Sunderland doesn't just require good defensive output, it also highlights his ball progression and ability to crash into the box and cause damage as a late box arrival. This season, Jobe has 3 goal contributions, with one of them being a worldy strike against Derby, which isn't an uncommon thing for him to do. He definitely has a tendency to strike the ball from long range and has the ball striking ability to cause damage when he does so. If we pull up his shot map, we see that 11 of his shots are coming from just about inside the box or around the edges of the box, and that is something that he does have in his game. I said before, he will have a few pop shots if he can, but these kind of closer to the edge of the box shots, for me, highlight his box crashing and that duty and the ability that he has to just come in and cause chaos. He will arrive late into the box behind the number 10 or the wingers or whoever's coming in there and just cause a bit of chaos. He'll just be a nuisance, and that reminds me obviously of Jude, who does very, very similar. He does it for England all the time. But he isn't just about being a box crasher, you know, he's not limited to just being someone who comes in and throws his body around and gets stuck in there. No, he also has a very, very high amount of technical ability and is just so important to Sunderland's general play. Jobe takes an average of 52.83 touches per 90 and completes just over 36 passes per 90 as well, whilst also averaging an 86.6% pass completion rate. Something I do really like about the Englishman though is his tempo about his game. I feel like he dictates the game to his own pace. He can take a touch and just keep the ball moving with a sideways or backways pass, or he can quickly turn the half turn and break the opposition's pressing and defensive lines. Or he can also produce a bit of a special pass to break a team down when they're sitting on the edge of their own box. For example, if we look at this short sequence that I'm going to pull up on screen now, we see him positioned on the edge of the Spanish 18-yard box. It's a pretty tricky position because I believe there's about 9 Spanish players in or on the edge of their own box, and Jobe Bellingham is tasked with you know, trying to do something from this position. But Jobe, he's 100 miles an hour ahead of the rest of us, and he sees this movement from the England winger, and he has the ability to pick out a spectacular pass. He threads the ball through, taking 4 Spanish defenders out the game, and sends his English winger perfectly through on goal. It's really, really nice football from the England team, and specifically Jobe Bellingham. However, this type of creativity, these type of magic passes is something that I want to see more of from Jobe, if I'm honest. He has some real moments of just, wow, proper magic, where he picks out a spectacular pass like that most recent one against Spain. But I do feel like if he had one thing to work on, it would be adding a little bit more chance creation to his game and just trying to be a little bit more dynamic in the final third if he can. However, it's not his main role, so it's not a glaring issue for me. Per 90 this season, he's averaged 1.9 key passes, 2.14 passes into the final third, and 0.05 expected assists. Now, I don't think it's awful. It's not absolutely dreadful, and as I said before, his role and his duty in this team isn't to be that creative spark all the time. I mean, you've got Romain Mundle, Patrick Roberts, Chris Rigg, who's kind of taken a lot of that leadership and them creative roles. But I would just like to see maybe a little bit more from Jobe, just a little bit more, teensy bit more, and I think that could elevate his game massively if he can try and create for others a little bit more in the final third. Now though, I want to look at Jobe's character and mentality, because I think it's something that is so important when you're signing a young player. You could sign a young player who's properly arrogant and isn't going to work for their spot and expects to be in there, or you can sign a young player who's driven and thirsty to prove himself and prove to the manager that he deserves a chance, which for me is exactly how I view Jobe, and I'm going to tell you why. As I said at the start of the video, he had a relatively tough first season with the Black Cats, but despite that, he still had interest from the likes of Brentford and Crystal Palace in the Premier League, with both clubs allegedly offering pretty solid fees for him. However, a lot of reports have now stated that Jobe didn't want to go, as he felt like staying at Sunderland for at least another season was what he needed for his development. I mean, surely there's not many 18-year-olds, which is how old he was at the time of last summer, that would turn down moves to the Premier League at 18-year-olds. If a Premier League club comes asking, once you've just finished bottom half in the Championship with your club, I don't think there's many 18-year-olds that would say no. However, Jobe decided that it was best for his development to stay at Sunderland. At least that's what the reports I've read have said, is that he wanted to stay at Sunderland for another season of development because he didn't believe he was ready. Now, someone who's humble enough to know they aren't ready and wants to stay another season to improve themselves is just the signs of a really good player and a really good person. And I think that's just someone that would be really good to have around the dressing room. Next summer he's going to be coming up to 20 years old next September. But that's still really young. He's still just 20 years old come next September, and he already knows he wants to be improving. He doesn't just want to go to a club and sit on the bench or go back out on loan. He wants to be improving and making sure that he can eventually threaten to be starting for teams. He doesn't want to just go to the Premier League and ride the bench. He wants to go to the Premier League and make an impact. So all in all, I think Jobe would be a very solid signing for any of the clubs I've mentioned, as he possesses all the right abilities to become a very dominant number 8 in any of Europe's top 5 leagues. As I've said before as well, and what he did with Sunderland, he can cover as a centre forward, as an attacking midfielder, as a number 6, as a number 8. That versatility is also something that could be massive for any clubs that do push into Europe. You know, you could be looking at someone like a Bournemouth could come in for him if they do get themselves into Europe, or a Fulham, or a Nottingham Forest. Just for that depth and versatility, Jobe, I think, will see himself in one of Europe's top 5 leagues next season. Whether that's with Sunderland or not, I'm not too sure. So ladies and gents, if you have enjoyed today's video, please do leave a like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts on Jobe Bellingham. Is he overrated, or is he underrated, or is he simply just a really good talent? I'll see you in the next one. Peace.